Thank you, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lord Giri, and today we'll be doing a webinar on accessibility. We will focus mostly on Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. We'll go through some of the basics. With me today, I have my two colleagues, Jody Anderson-Saban, as well as Sonima Villegas. They're both working with me on some instructional design projects. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves briefly.
Hi, everyone. This is Jody Arneson-Saban. Thanks for joining us. I'm joining from California, and I'll be presenting on accessibility in Word during the webinar.
Hello, this is Sonima Villegas, and I am joining from Texas, and I will be touching on accessibility in PowerPoint.
Thank you. So just a few logistics before we get started. The webinar is broken into two parts. So we'll first start on Microsoft Word and then do some Q&A, and then we'll spend the second half on PowerPoint and then follow that up with Q&A. We will provide our slides as well as the recording of the webinar at the end. So if we go a little bit faster, just be assured that we'll provide our slides as well as the recording at the end. Okay. So in terms of our learning outcomes, the idea is to briefly describe how to check your document for accessibility. And you'll notice that the same accessibility checker that's used in Microsoft Word is somewhat similar to the one in PowerPoint. So you should be able to also recall how to use some of the built-in accessibility tools in both Microsoft Word as well as in PowerPoint. And then we'll also discuss some of the accessibility compliance guidelines regarding alternative text, headings, lists, and links, as well as tables. So now I'll hand it over to Jody to go over some Microsoft Word accessibility.
Thank you, Dr. Giddy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Before we begin, I wanted to provide some preliminary information. So the first is that this webinar is based on demonstrations in Windows Microsoft Word, and the same will be true for the PowerPoint demonstrations later in the webinar. So all of the accessibility features are the same in both Windows and Apple. However, the Windows and Apple Word workspaces look different from one another. If you use an Apple computer, you'll still find value in the webinar. You'll just need to look up how to access the features that we're discussing here today. There are also some differences in older versions of Word. You'll see some differences if you're working in Windows versions 97 through 2007. And lastly, this webinar is designed for beginning and intermediate learners. If you're an advanced learner and you already know about accessibility in Word and PowerPoint, you are more than welcome to stay and review this material with us. Okay, so let's dive into Microsoft Word. So the great news is that Word has a built-in accessibility checker, and it's a great start. It's wonderful. However, it's not perfect, and it won't capture all of the accessibility issues in your document. And we'll go over that in more detail. So with that said, you should always review your document, even if the accessibility checker doesn't find any issues. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how to use the accessibility checker in Word. I have a document that's open. So this document, Darwin's Finches, I'm going to actually just arrange my view screen here for a moment. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Review. This is a tab up here on the top. And then I'm going to select Check Accessibility. And you'll see that the Accessibility Checker panel appears over here on the right-hand side of the screen. And the Accessibility Checker panel presents errors, warnings, and tips to you. In this case, there aren't any tips for this document. So when you choose an item from the panel results, Word will highlight the issue in the document. So for instance, if I click on Picture 6, which is under Missing Alternative Text, it selects this, this picture in the document. And then it says why it's important to fix it, and the steps to take to fix this error. So the accessibility checker panel, as I mentioned, provides 3 levels of guidance: errors, which are the most serious; warnings, these are serious; and then tips, which provide guidance on how to make your document a little better. Most of the errors, warnings, and tips provided will fall into one of several categories, and those categories are headings, formatted lists, alternative text, structured tables, and meaningful links. And those are the topics that we're going to discuss today. So earlier I mentioned that the accessibility checker in Word won't be able to check everything, and here are a couple examples. So in terms of alternative text, the accessibility checker can tell if you don't have alternative text. However, it cannot tell if your alternative text is accurate or descriptive enough. And also, the accessibility checker cannot determine sufficient color contrast. If you've used the accessibility checker in Canvas, you know that that accessibility checker can alert you to insufficient color contrast. So it's just something to note that the Word accessibility checker and the Canvas accessibility checker differ in that respect. A moment ago, I mentioned that most errors, warnings, and tips fall into a few main categories. And the first category that we're going to discuss today is headings. So headings improve accessibility by allowing low vision learners to more easily navigate a document. And for someone using a screen reader, I equate it to being able to pick up a book and skim the chapter headings to quickly find the content that they want. The screen reader reads the headings in a document as a list to the learner. So this enables the learner to navigate the document in an efficient and meaningful way. If headings haven't been applied in your document, the learner has no way to navigate from one topic to the next. They have to wade through a lot of information, and it just causes them, it costs them precious time, basically. So headings also support learners in understanding the relationship between topics and subtopics. And I know this can be difficult to visualize how a screen reader reads headings to a learner. So I've actually provided a link here to a demonstration video on YouTube, and you can access that link and view the video after the webinar. So in a Word document, the headings are determined by the style. So to apply a heading 1 format to a word or title, one would select the heading 1 style and apply it to that element. And I can go ahead and show you how to do that now. So I'm going to go back to my Finch's document and close the accessibility checker. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the View tab, and under the Show group here, you'll see that there is an option for Navigation pane. And under the Navigation pane, there's a Headings tab, and you'll see that there aren't any headings that have been applied in this document yet. So I'm going to go ahead and apply my headings now. I'm going to select the element that I want to apply the heading to, which is Darwin's Finches. And then I'm going to go to the Home tab. And under this Styles group, there are different heading options here. So I'm going to apply heading 1 to Darwin's Finches. And Introduction, I'm going to apply heading 2. And then I'm just going to go throughout my document and appropriately apply these headings. And you'll notice that the headings are populating in the navigation panel here on the left-hand side of the screen. So here are a few quick guidelines for creating useful headings. You want your headings to be succinct and clear, and your headings should be related to the content that follows them. And your headings should also follow a logical hierarchy, and you shouldn't skip levels. So for instance, if you went from using heading 1 to heading 3 in your document, that would be confusing for someone using a screen reader, because they'll wonder where heading 2 is, and they might think that they've missed something. So we'll now move on to formatted lists. And there are 2 types of lists in Word: ordered lists, which are numbered, and unordered lists, which are not numbered. So ordered lists are used to describe a sequential process. This means that key information is contained in the order of the list. Ordered lists typically use numbers, letters, or Roman numerals to list items in order. And you'll want to use ordered lists if the content needs to be read in a specific order. So here's an example of an ordered list, which depicts the top 10 male dog names in 2018. As you can see, Max is unsurprisingly number 1. So unordered lists are used to highlight key information, and unordered lists typically use bullets to identify items. You'll want to use an unordered list if the order of the list items is not important. This is an example of an unordered list, and it depicts common grocery list items. You'll see that on the list there's water, orange juice, and fruit, and it doesn't really matter the order in which someone hears that information. So I'll now demonstrate how to format ordered and unordered lists in Word. So here I have my 2 lists. The first one is an ordered list, and the second one is an unordered list. So I'll go ahead and select the content that I want to apply the list to. And I'm going to go to the Home tab, which I'm already on. And then under the paragraph group, there's the bullet option and the number option. Because there's content contained in the order of this list, and I want it to be read in a specific order, I'm going to apply the numbers. And then the unordered list, I'm going to apply the bullets. So you probably already know how to apply bullets and numbers to your list. You may just not have known the relevance for accessibility. So the next important category that we'll discuss is alternative text. This is also referred to as alt text. Alternative text is descriptive text that is applied to an object that will be read to viewers who are using a screen reader or learners who are using a screen reader. So you'll want to add descriptive text, alternative text, to any type of object in your document. This includes pictures, clip art, tables, and more. For this webinar, I'm going to use an image as an example. However, you can apply the same rules to any object that you insert in your document. Alternative text refers to the description of the object or your picture in a document. For instance, the description of this image is one red apple outdoors on a tree. When a screen reader encounters a picture, it will read this description to the learner. I'll now show you how to add alternative text to an image in your document. I'm going to go back to the original document that we were working with, the Finch's document. And when we ran the accessibility checker, we determined that this image had an issue. It didn't have alternative text. So I'm going to select the image and I'm going to right click on it and I'll select Edit Alt Text. And that brings up this alt text panel on the right hand side. You'll see there's a button that says Generate a Description for Me. And let's go ahead and click that and see what Microsoft Word generates. So Microsoft Word generates a close-up of a bird, description generated with very high confidence. And that's not incorrect. However, I think that I can provide some more descriptive text for this image. So I'll go ahead and write that in now. Okay, so I've written here 4 of the species of finch observed by Darwin on the Galapagos Islands showing variation of the beak. And that is indeed more descriptive than the text that Microsoft Word provided. You'll see there's also a place where you can indicate if the image is decorative. You would check this off if the image doesn't add any information to the content of the page. In this case, it does, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it. Providing valuable and meaningful alternative text is a practice in and of itself. Here are some very basic guidelines to get you started. Here we go, sorry. So your description should convey the content and the function of the image. and you want to make sure that your descriptions are succinct. And screen readers generally provide the learner with what type of content the object is, so you don't need to provide descriptions such as image of or table of. That's already understood for the learner. Our next category is structured tables. So tables can be tricky for screen readers, especially if a table has merged cells or any complex elements within it. Generally speaking, if you can tab through a table in your document from left to right and row by row, a screen reader shouldn't have any trouble with it. So the table that you see here on screen is an example of an accessible table. It has a clearly defined header row, and I'll go ahead and provide a few more examples. So here's an example of an inaccessible table. In the syllabus, you can see that some of the cells are merged. This is a common practice. However, it's actually quite difficult for a screen reader to successfully navigate this type of table and read the contents to the learner. Here is the same syllabus, and it's been converted to an accessible table. You can see that there are no merged cells or complex elements within the table. There are two basic types of tables. There are data tables and layout tables. And a table is a data table when it has row headers, column headers, or both. So on screen, you can see a data table. And when a table is accessible, the screen reader would read the content of the table like this. Shelley's daughters, name, age, birthday. Name, Jackie, age 5, birthday, April 5. Name, Beth, age 8, birthday, January 14. So in order for a screen reader to accurately read the information in this way, you as the document's author need to designate or structure the table's header row, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So a layout table is for visual purposes only, and generally we consider layout tables to be bad for accessibility. The best thing to do is remove layout tables from your document and use another more inclusive and meaningful way to display your content to the learner. I'll now demonstrate how to designate a header row for your data table. So here's the table that I'm going to be working with. As you can see, I can tab through the table from left to right, row by row. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the row that I want to be the header row, and then I'm going to right-click on the table and select Table Properties. And you'll see this Table Properties dialog box pop up. I'm going to go to the Row tab, and I'm going to uncheck the selection that says Allow row to break across pages. And I'm going to check off the Repeat as Header row at the top of each page. So it's important to have this checked off even if your table doesn't span across multiple pages. This is actually what designates the header row as the header row. And while we're here, I just want to take a moment to point out the Alt Text tab. This is where you would apply the alt text for a table. And if I were going to apply a title, I would apply something along the lines of Shelley's daughters' ages and birthdays. And for descriptive text, I might write something like Shelley has 2 daughters, Jackie and Beth. Jackie's 5 years old and her birthday is on April 5th. Beth is 8 years old and her birthday is on January 14th. So just to wrap up on tables, I wanted to summarize the key information. Keep it simple. Don't use any nested tables, complex elements, or merged cells in your tables. Use clear logical labels for header cells to organize your columns and or rows. And as I mentioned, use the repeat header rows from the table layout tools to define your header cells, even if the table never spans across multiple pages. Our last category in Word is meaningful links. And in the first bullet on the slide, I provided an example of an inaccessible link. I'll go ahead and read out how a screen reader would read this line of text to a listener. See link, https://www.allaboutbirds.org/guide/browse_tax.aspx family equals 27. So you can see that using a URL as display text is ineffective because the screen reader reads out the entire URL to the learner, and it's time confusing and confusing for the low vision student. In the second bullet there, you'll see that I've provided another demonstration video link. It's on YouTube, and you can view that once you receive the slides after the webinar. So the most important thing to mention about links and screen readers is that the screen reader provides links in a document as a separate list for the learner. When the screen reader does this, the link is removed from its context in the document. However, if this list of links or the links are named appropriately, the list of links is very helpful for the learner. So let's discuss the function of the list of links in greater detail. First, the link list provides navigational support in the same way that headers do. By providing descriptive, concise links, the low vision learner is able to skim the document in a sense by hearing all of the links listed out at once. So this would be similar to a sighted person just sort of flipping through the pages of a book. So the order of your links matters. The list of links that screen readers provide to learners is alphabetical. So not only are the links removed from their context, they are provided to the learner in a different order. And this causes confusion if all or many of your links begin with click here. If you do this, then the student might have 10 links that all sound the same. So the learner has to click into each one of them to know what they're about. This is time confusing and confusing for the learner. So to provide the most meaningful links, it's best practice to avoid repetition. And one great way to avoid repetition is to never use click here as the display text for your links. And we'll take a look at an example on the next slide. So here are two examples of links which link to the same content. The inappropriate example reads, click here to read the article. This is not very descriptive and will cause some usability issues for those who are using a screen reader. The appropriate example reads, read about debunking the myth of voter fraud. If this link is removed from its context, it still makes sense because it has descriptive display text. So notice that the appropriate example is not only more accessible to the learner using a screen reader, it also provides more information for all learners as well. So here are some guidelines for providing meaningful links. The first one, as we discussed, is avoid using URLs as link text, and the exception here would be if you anticipate printing out your document. You also want to keep your link text concise and specific. And lastly, don't use the word link or click here in your links. So I'll wrap up by demonstrating how to change the display text for your links. So I'm back on my Finch's document, and I know that there is a paragraph here that has this long, cumbersome link. So I'm going to select that link and copy it. And I actually already know that I want to apply that link to this element, Ancestral Finch. So I'm going to highlight Ancestral Finch, and then I'm going to go up to the Insert tab up at the top, and there's this links group right here. And up at the top, there's this link here, link option. I'm going to click the arrow and select Insert Link. And the Insert Link dialog box pops up. And you'll see at the top there's a field, text to display, and then it's populated for me Ancestral Finch because I already have that selected in my document. And down at the bottom, there's an area where I can insert the URL under the address field. So I'm going to insert that now and press OK. So now we can see that that's created a meaningful link for Ancestral Finch. My last step is I'm going to go ahead and delete this long link here. So that concludes our section on Microsoft Word. To recap, we discussed the following categories: the Word Accessibility Checker, headings, formatted lists, alternative text, structured tables, and meaningful links. So now we're going to take some time for questions. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them into the chat box below. Okay, doesn't look like anybody have any questions. So I'm going to hand it off to Sonamar, who will present on Microsoft PowerPoint.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen here. Great job, Jody. One thing I do want to point out with my presentation, a lot of the principles and the components behind accessibility in Microsoft Word are exactly the same as PowerPoint. So what we wanted to do here with the PowerPoint is just touch upon the differences. So we're going to touch upon the important components and then just demonstrate what is different about PowerPoint to make some comparisons there. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about when is it best to use PowerPoint. So instead of using Word, when could I use PowerPoint? PowerPoint can be used to introduce or summarize higher level concepts for each unit in your course. For example, if there are some specific quote unquote pressure points or known topics that are usually difficult for students to grasp, you're going to want to use PowerPoint because you are able to provide simple animations and additional explanations through PowerPoint. It can also be used to create simple animations to reinforce or summarize complex mechanisms or processes. One other crucial difference between Word and PowerPoint and when to use PowerPoint is that you can use the voice-over narration for slides, which humanizes the online learning experience for students, and it helps you dive into complex images of concepts on certain PowerPoint slides that you wouldn't necessarily do without a voice-over narration. That's also something that is wonderful for students who may have some accessibility issues. So the first thing I want to demonstrate with PowerPoint accessibility and just show you how to get to is the accessibility checker. The key components, again, are the same as in Word. For example, it's not going to capture all of the issues. So you want to make sure that you visually check your PowerPoint for accessibility because of that reason. So really quickly, I'm going to show you how to find that. There's two ways to find that in PowerPoint. Okay, so the first way is if you go up here to where it says File, and you scroll down to check for issues, you will see that there's that button there for check accessibility. That's one way to do it. The other way is if you go to your review pane up here at the top, you will also see that same button for check for accessibility. You'll note off to the side that it looks exactly the same and has the same components as Microsoft Word. Now, what are the limitations? Similar to Word, PowerPoint can't tell if you're using meaningful text if it's provided in that alternate text box. Therefore, you're going to want to check that the alternate text is appropriate for the image being present. And I'll show you an example of that a little bit later. Second, it's important for you to manually verify that the reading order is correct. And you're going to want to make sure that you consider color for both low vision and colorblind users. There should be sufficient contrast between the foreground text or graphics and the background. So we're going to go ahead and dive into these and discuss these further. So the first thing that I want to point out before we dive into that is PowerPoint has some really wonderful built-in slide design themes and slide layouts that's already accessible, and it's already built into PowerPoint. When you use them with a new slide, these layouts are automatically ensuring that the reading order works for everyone. When we send these slides out, I will also send a link to some of those accessible PowerPoint templates. One thing that you do want to consider is that when you select a ready-made template, you've also got to make sure that it has a good combination of background and font color contrast. So what does that mean? So let's take a look at this here. We all know that using color is an excellent way to quickly visualize material for students. It can distinguish foreground from background, and it can emphasize the importance of something, but not all color combinations are created equal. For example, in the image here, the white text, and let me find my little pointer tool, the white text on yellow background, white on yellow creates a very low contrast that's difficult to read. On contrary, here you have your green background with white text, which creates a high contrast example. Black text on white background is usually the default and the most commonly used form of text and color contrast. But if you see here, you can see very easily the differences and how difficult it may be for students that have some visual impairments. The use of color can be a very powerful method to communicate information and relationships. An important aspect of using color is to ensure sufficient contrast between the foreground and the background. Again, the maximum contrast is black versus white, but sometimes this could be a little bit overwhelming as it can cause a glare. So please consider using other color combinations such as navy, dark green, or maroon for the darks, and then some pastel colors for the lights. And what that does is it helps lessen the contrast. On those the pre-made templates that you may find in PowerPoint, the modern designs sometimes have very subtle contrast. So you want to make sure to look at those closely as well. So in order to make sure that your document design is learner friendly, you want to be very careful with color contrast. And here's a quick guide for you. While creating beautiful, accessible, usable interfaces to house content, you want to make sure you have the learner's goals or needs in mind. The following here is a quick snapshot of different colored text and backgrounds that are accessible and acceptable. Notice how accessible color combinations show text color that is easy to read against the color of the background. So these are the best here, color contrast, and then you've got some fair and then some very poor examples. And if you look down here at the bottom, these lower colors almost seem like they're vibrating on the screen. So you want to stay away from those color combinations. So one thing that I want to do before I move on is I want to show you those accessible, already built-in slide combinations. So when we go up here, if you want to insert a new slide, these right here, these are the ones that Office has already built in that are considered to be accessible. So anytime you use any of these slides, you can pretty much consider those to be accessible slides. And the other thing for you to consider here is when you're looking at, whoops, I'm sorry there. Right here, and you're going to open a new template. Any of these templates are also accessible as far as reading order. However, you still want to make sure that you are looking at the color contrasts on those and make sure that those are accessible. But this is pretty fun because you pretty much know at any point if you use these that they're going to be accessible as far as reading order. So we're going to talk about reading order now. Okay. Now going back to reading order, it is crucial to note the importance of this as it pertains to accessibility. So a screen reader is going to read the content in the order in which you place it on the slide. So not necessarily the order in which it's already on there, but in the order that you place it. So as you add and remove objects such as placeholders, graphics, and word art on a slide, PowerPoint keeps track of the order in which they are layered rather than how you intend for it to be read. So if a presentation is created from scratch, reading order is so important and you need to be sure to check it and manually correct that. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. So just imagine for a student how confusing it might be if they rely solely on assistive technology if the reading order is not correct. In addition to that, if you were to convert a PowerPoint into an alternate format such as Word or Adobe, that would also be affected by the reading order. So it's really important. In addition, you'll want to make sure that your text is not too small, especially if the presentation will be viewed on a projector. You do not want to use color as the only way to convey information. If you would like to highlight a certain phrase or word, then you'll want to use something else like underlining or italicizing. Also, transitions and animations should be simple. Complex or automatic transitions and animations can be distracting and may not always be read by a screen reader. You're going to want to use, again, clear and simple language. If you embed a video into your PowerPoint, ensure that it's captioned. And if you embed audio, include a transcript. And the best way to include a transcript is to place it in the notes section. Now let's take a look at how we can check reading order on a PowerPoint slide. I'm going to go back here. Let me get that off the screen. So one way, close this out, to check reading order again is to right here on your home button, you see where it says arrange. You're going to want to click on that. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my mouse clicker not showing on there. There we go. Go all the way down to the bottom where it says selection pane. There we go. And right here on the right-hand side, it's going to show you the reading order of the text. Now, one thing to remember here is that the reading order is actually listed from last to first. So it's actually going to read from the bottom on up. Okay, so you'll want to make sure that what you want read first is at the bottom, what you want second is next on the way up, and whatever you want read last is going to be at the top. So that's a little bit different here. Now, one trick is that you can click on the gray area and get off of a slide here and click your tab button, and notice that the tab button is taking you in the order that it's being read. So that's just a quick way if you want to check reading order. Click on the gray area, click tab, and if it's highlighting each section in the order you want it read, then your reading order is going to be correct for a screen reader. That's just a quick tip there. Resume the slideshow here. All right, so when we talk about applying text to images, it is best practice in education for educators to write their documents so that they are meaningful without images. You'll want to make sure that you're adding the images to reinforce the text material. And the reason why this is important, it's because of the students that may have difficulty accessing the content otherwise. When you add the images, then you'll want to make sure to add that brief alternate text as we described earlier with the Word documents, and make sure that it's for reference purposes, or you can include a caption that is going to benefit all users. So if images do not add any new information to the text content, that information should be included. I'm sorry, if they do add any new information to the text content, you want to make sure to add that into the alternate text or the caption, because we want to make sure that, again, it's accessible to all users. So one useful way to think about images in your online courses, if you're going to place it on a PowerPoint, is to ask yourself the following questions. Can all students obtain the necessary accessible information about the image through either the alternate text, the image caption, the surrounding text, or on a long description page? If not, then students with visual disabilities are at a disadvantage. Also, on the PowerPoint images, on the PowerPoint slides, if an image is decorative, you need to make sure to mark it as such. So let's take a quick look at alt text. I'm going to choose this image here. Okay. Similar to Word, you're going to want to select your image, right-click, go to Edit Alt Text, and place your alternative text in that box. If it is simply a decorative image, then you can click right there, mark as decorative. The next thing we're going to touch upon is slide titles. Slide titles should be unique when possible, although this is not required. The accessibility benefit to unique slide titles is that for students using assistive technologies, it's easier to determine which slide has focus and how that information relates to the content. So by giving every slide a unique title, your students who rely on assistive technology can better navigate your PowerPoint. So when we consider a slide title, I equate that to what Jody talked about as far as headings. Headings are useful if a student has already reviewed a material and they just want to go back and review. Then the headings can be read and the student knows where to go. It's the same thing with PowerPoint slide titles. So for example, sometimes when we present PowerPoints, we may have 3 slides that are going to cover, for example, reflexes. So when it reads that slide title to a student, it will read it as reflexes, 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 even though each content on that slide may be different. So you'll want to consider changing it to reflex the definition, reflex tendon flex, reflex myotatic reflexes. That helps with accessibility overall and assists the student in navigating the PowerPoint. So there's 2 places that you can change it. You can change it from the outline view on the side, or you can change it directly on the slide itself. So I'll show you really quickly how to get there. Okay. When you go to your PowerPoint, you'll want to click on View. Okay. Up on the navigation screen, if you click on Outline View, you will see that it's going to give you the outline view off to the side. So you're able to see in bold what each of those slides are titled, or you can just change it directly on the slide itself. So really easy to do on here as well. As far as PowerPoint links, again, the principles are the same as in Word. You'll want to make sure that you avoid links that maybe are not informative, and double check your links for readability and length. Now, since it's the similar concepts, what I'll do is I'll just quickly show you how you can do that in a similar way as you do in Word. So you will basically double click on the word that you would like to attach the link to. You will scroll down right here to where it says link on this navigation menu. Click on it and you'll get the same box as in Word. Press OK, and you've converted it into a link. So really easy to do, similar concept as in Word. All right, so that has concluded the PowerPoint section. You're welcome to ask questions in the chat box. In the meantime, I do want to attribute the bulk of our presentation to a very awesome course by the California Community College that provided us most of the content in this slide, in this presentation. And then also, here's our contact information in case you have additional questions. Dr. Giddy?
Thank you so much, Sonima and Jody Anderson. I thought that was a great presentation. I think one of the things that I also want to highlight is that this is just the beginning of the conversation. We truly want to make sure that throughout the system that the topic of accessibility becomes part of our culture, in that the way we approach course development, the way we approach content development is centered around making sure that we are considering all of our users, including learners with disabilities. So this is just the beginning of the conversation, and I'm very, very grateful to have these two professionals working with me. As we continue with the conversation, I think the next phase is going to be looking at other topics, including PDFs, then multimedia, and then we'll also do some workshops or webinars on accessibility in Canvas. What we will also do is that, as we mentioned earlier, we will follow up with the recording as well as the copies of the PowerPoint. So thank you so much for joining us today.